Hello, part 3. um, okay, Book of Abraham, number 1. Originally, Joseph Smith claimed that this record was written by Abraham, quote, by his own hands upon papyrus, end quote, a claim still prominent in the heading of the Book of Abraham. This claim could not be evaluated for decades, and as many thought that the papyri were lost in a fire. The original papyrus Joseph translated has since been found and has stated in the church's July issue of 2014, church's July 2014 translation and historicity of the Book of Abraham essay, quote, scholars have identified the papyrus fragments as part of the standard funerary texts that date to between the 3rd century BCE and the 1st century CE, long after Abraham lived, end quote. We know this is the papyrus that Joseph used for translation because the hieroglyphs match in chronological order to the hieroglyphs in Joseph's Kirkland Egyptian papers, which contain his grammar and alphabet of the Egyptian language, Gael. Additionally, the papyrus were pasted onto paper, which have drawings of a temple and maps of the Kirkland, Ohio area on the back, and they were also accompanied by an affidavit by Emma Smith verifying that they had been in possession of Joseph Smith. 2. Egyptologists have also translated the source materials for the Book of Abraham and have found it to be nothing more than a common pagan Egyptian funerary text for a deceased man named Hor, Hor, around 1st century CE. In other words, it was a common breathing permit that Egyptians buried with their dead. It has nothing to do with Abraham or anything Joseph claimed in his translation for the Book of Abraham. The church admits this in an essay. Quote, none of the characters on the papyrus fragments mention Abraham's name or any of the events recorded in the Book of Abraham. Mormon and non-Mormon Egyptologists agree that the characters on the fragments do not match the translation given in the Book of Abraham, though there is not unanimity, even among non-Mormon scholars, about the proper... Scholars have identified the papyrus fragments as part of the standard funerary texts that have been deposited with mummified bodies. These fragments date to between 3rd century BCE, 1st century CE, long after Abraham lived. Okay. I'm sorry. I wish I had a stand for this because I'm not going to fucking hold it. Looks like I'm going to fucking hold it. Okay, so... It's just showing 2 graphs basically in the extended pages of the Book of Mormon, and how it's just the exact same. So very briefly, I'll say Joseph Smith's translation or Joseph Smith's interpretation, and then modern Egyptology interpretation. Okay, number 1, Joseph Smith, Angel of the Lord. Modern Egyptology interpretation, the spirit of Ba, or of Hor, Hor, the deceased guy. It's a name. 2, Abraham was fastened upon an altar. The deceased, his name was Hor. 3, the idolatrous priest of Elkanah. 3, modern Egyptology interpretation, Anubis. Just bullshit. Okay. I'm sorry. So... a lot of this, if you have to look at it. So, I mean, I'm going to tell you what it is eventually at the end, but I can't really explain it very well. But basically, he's just taking some random Egyptian stuff and translating it into old school, what an Abraham prophet would have said. I don't fucking know. Okay, number 4. The Book of Abraham teaches an incorrect Newtonian view of the universe. These Newtonian astronomical events, mechanics, and models of the universe have since been succeeded in substantially modified by the 20th century Einsteinian physics. My fucking God. Okay, so what we find in Abraham 3 and the official scriptures of the LDS Church regarding science reflects the Newtonian world concept, just as the Catholic Church's Potomac cosmology was displaced by the new Copernican and Newtonian world model. However, the 19th century canonized Newtonian worldview has since been displaced by Einstein's 20th century science. Keith E. Norman, an LDS scholar, has written for the LDS Church, quote, "It is no longer possible to pretend there is no conflict." Norman continues, "Scientific cosmology began its leap forward just when Mormon doctrine was becoming stabilized. The revolution in 20th century physics precipitated by Einstein dethroned Newtonian physics as the ultimate explanation of the way the universe works. Relativity theory and quantum mechanics, combined with advances in astronomy, have established a vastly different picture of how the universe began, how it is structured and operates, and the nature of matter and energy. This new scientific cosmology poses a serious challenge to the Mormon version of the universe." Grant Palmer, a Mormon historian and CES teacher for 34 years, wrote, "Many of the astronomical and cosmological ideas found in both Joseph Smith's environment and in the Book of Abraham have become out of vogue, and some of these Newtonian concepts are scientific relics. The evidence suggests that the Book of Abraham reflects concepts of Joseph Smith's time and place rather than those of an ancient world." This was taken from An Insider's View of Mormon Origins by Grant Palmer. Number 5. 86% of Book of Abraham chapters 2, 4, and 5 are King James Version Genesis chapters 1, 2, 11, and 12. 66 out of the 77 verses are quotations or close paraphrases of King James Version wording. If the Book of Abraham is an ancient text written thousands of years ago by his own hand upon papyrus, then what are 17th century King James Version edits text doing in there? What does it say about the book being an ancient written text by Abraham? Number 6. Why are there anachronisms in the Book of Abraham? For example, the terms Chaldeans, Egyptus, and Pharaoh are all anachronistic. Additionally, Abraham refers to these fastest smiles in chapter 1 verses 12 and chapter 1 verses 14. However, as noted and conceded before in the above church essay, these did not even exist in Abraham's time, as they were the 1st century CE pagan Egyptian funerary documents. Quote, some have assumed that the hieroglyphs adjacent to and surrounding the picture, number 1, must be a source of the text of the Book of Abraham. Why would anyone assume that? Quote, and it came to pass that the priests laid violence upon me, and that they may slay me also, and as they did those virgins upon his altar, and that you may have a knowledge of this altar, I will refer you to the representation at the commencement of this record. Abraham chapter 1 verse 12. So number 7, picture 2, in reference to the pictures in the Book of Mormon and the additional pages section, it says that the sun receives its, quote, light from the revolutions of Kolob, end quote. We know now, however, that the process of nuclear fusion is what makes the stars and suns shine. With the discovery of quantum mechanics, scientists learn that the sun's source of energy is internal and not external. The sun shines because of the thorough nuclear fusion. The sun does not shine because it gets its light from any other star or any other external source. Number 8, there is a book published in 1829 by Thomas Dick entitled The Philosophy of a Future State. Joseph Smith owned a copy. That book was published 1 year before he wrote the Book of Mormon. So Joseph Smith owned a copy, and Oliver Cowdery quoted some lengthy excerpts from the book in December 1836 in a Messenger and Advocate paper. Klaus Hansen, an LDS scholar, stated the progressive aspects of Joseph's theology as well as its cosmology, while in a general way compatible with antebellum thought, bears some remarkable resemblance to Thomas Dick's philosophy of a future state. Hansen continues, some very striking parallels to Smith's theology suggest that the similarities between the two may be more than coincidental. Dick's lengthy book, an ambitious treatise on astronomy and metaphysics, proposed the idea that matter is external and indestructible, and reject the notion of creation ex nihilo. Much of the book dealt with the infinity of the universe, made of innumerable stars spread out over immeasurable distances. Dick speculated that many of these stars were peopled by various orders of intelligence, and that these intelligences were, quote, progressive beings in quote, end quote, in various stages of evolution toward perfection. In the Book of Abraham, part of what consists of a treatise on astronomy and cosmology, eternal beings of various orders and stages of development likewise populate numerous stars. They too are called intelligences. Dick speculated that the systems of the universe revolve around a common center, the throne of God. In the Book of in the Book of Abraham, one star named Kolob was, quote, the nearest unto the throne of God, end quote. Other stars in ever diminishing order were placed in increasing distances from the center, end quote. Number 9, Elder Jeffrey R. Holland was directly asked about the papyri not matching the Book of Abraham in a March 2012 BBC interview. Sweeney, quote, Mr. Smith got this papyri and he translated them, and subsequently, as the Egyptologist cracked the code, something completely different, ... Holland interrupts, stating, all I'm saying is that what we got translated into the Word of God. The vehicle for that I do not understand and do not claim to know or know no Egyptian. The fuck does that fucking mean, idiot? Okay. See that? I'm frothing at the mouth. Let me take a sip. Let me take... Okay. Okay. So, I don't know and I don't stand, but it's the word of God really the best answer that a prophet, seer, and revelator can come up with in such a profound problem and stumbling block that is driving many members out of the church? The following are respected Egyptian scholars and Egyptologists' statements regarding Joseph Smith and the Book of Abraham. Quote, these 3 pictures of Egyptian documents in the Pearl of Great Price, the Book of Mormon, depict the most common objects in the mortuary religion of Egypt, funerary documents. Joseph Smith's interpretations of them as a divine revelation through Abraham, therefore, was clearly demonstrates that he was totally unacquainted with the significance of these documents and absolutely ignorant of the simplest facts of Egyptian writing and civilization. He was dumb. Another quote, it may be safely said that there is not one single word that is true in these explanations, end quote. And these are all from like doctors of like University of Chicago, London University, Oxford professor of Egyptology. Respected guys. Okay, last quote. It is difficult to deal seriously with Joseph Smith's impudent fraud. Smith has turned the goddess Isis into a king and Osiris into Abraham. In addition to the above, world-renowned and respected University Chicago professor of Egyptology, Dr. Robert Rittner, provided a detailed response and rebuttal to the LDS Church's translation and historicity of Book of Abraham essay that is sobering and devastating. Dr. Ritter's rebuttal to the Church's essay can be read, quote, here. 100 likes and I'll drop the link below. Okay, moving on. Polygamy. A quote from Elder Marlon K. Jensen, an LDS Church historian, from Swedish Rescue Fireside Audio. Quote, so, the question of polygamy. Of polyandry. Polygamy is when a man has multiple wives. Polyandry is when a man marries another man's wife. Joseph did both. One of the things that has also truly disturbed me in my research was discovering the real origins of polygamy and how Joseph Smith really practiced it. Joseph Smith was married to at least 34 women, and not women, girls. Some of them may be women, but I don't like that they just said women. But 34 girls, as now verified in the church's 2014 polygamy essays, polyandry. Of those 34 women, 11 of those were married women. Were married to other living men. So they weren't like just widows, and they didn't like get a divorce. Like their husbands were married. They're happily married, and Joseph Smith came along. Okay, so among them being Apostle Orson Hyde, who was sent on his mission to dedicate Palestine when Joseph secretly married his wife Miranda Hyde. Church historian Elder Marlon K. Jensen and unofficial apologists like Fern Warman do not dispute the polyandry. The church admits the polyandry in its October 24 Plural Marriage in Kirtland and Navajo essay. The church and apologists now attempt to justify these polyandrous marriages by theorizing that they probably didn't include sexual relations and thus were, quote, internal or dynastic sealings only. Bullshit. How is not having sex with a living man's wife on earth, only to take her away from him in the eternities, to be one of your Joseph 40 wives any better or any less immoral? During the summer of 1841, Joseph Smith tested Helen Mall Kimball's father, Apostle Heber C. Kimball, by asking Heber to give his wife, the late Helen's mother, to Joseph. This is what they said, quote, shortly after Heber's return from England, he was introduced to the doctrine of plural marriage directly through a startling test, a sacrifice that shook his very being and challenged his faith to the ultimate. He had already sacrificed homes, possessions, friends, relatives, all worldly rewards, peace, and tranquility for the restoration. Nothing was left to place on the altar save his life, his children, and his wife. Then came this Abrahamic test. Joseph demanded for himself what to Herbert was the unthinkable, his wife. Totally crushed by, I can't really say his wife's name, that's why I'm, Valletta. I like it. Totally crushed spiritually and emotionally, Herbert touched neither food or water for 3 days and 3 nights and continually sought confirmations and comfort from God. On the evening of the 3rd day, some kind of assurance came, and Herbert took Valletta to the upper room of Joseph's store on Walter Street. The prophet wept at the act of faith, devotion, and obedience. Joseph had never intended to take Valletta. It was all a test. Fucking rude. So if Joseph's polyandrous or polygamous marriages are innocuous dynastic sealings meant for the afterlife, as the church and apologists are now theorizing, and Joseph wanted to, quote, dynastically link himself to the Kimball family, why was Apostle Heber C. Kimball so troubled by Joseph Smith's command for his wife that he touched neither food nor water for 3 days or 3 nights? Essentially, he's saying if this marriage was just like to be eternal after you die, to be married to this lady and nothing to do in this life, and he's not gonna sleep with her because that's not part of the deal, like, why was he so worried? Because he was gonna sleep with her wife, you know? Okay. So, I hear it. Here we go. Okay, so out of the 34 women, 7 of them were teenage girls as young as 14 years old. Joseph was a 37-year-old man when he married 14-year-old Helen Mar Kimball, 23 years his junior. Even by 19th century standards, this is shocking. Okay, update. The church now admits that Joseph Smith married Helen Mar Kimball, quote, several months before her 15th birthday, end quote, in its October 2014 Plural Marriage in Kirtland and Navajo essay. Joseph took 14-year-old Helen Mar Kimball's hand in marriage after his disturbing Abrahamic test on her father, Heber, while promising Helen and her family eternal salvation and exaltation if she accepted. Manipulation. So, quote, just previous to my father's stating upon his last mission, but one to the eastern states, he taught me that the principle of celestial marriage, and having a great desire to be connected with the prophet Joseph, he offered me to him. This I afterward learned from the prophet's own mouth. My father had but one ewe lamb, but willingly laid her upon the altar. How cruel this seemed to the mother, whose heartstrings were already stretched until they were ready to snap asunder. For he had taken Sarah Noon to wife, and she thought she had made sufficient sacrifice, which I had during the 24 hours a day. My father introduced me to the principal and asked me if I would be sealed to Joseph, who came the next morning, and with my parents I heard him teach and explain the principle of celestial marriage. After which he said to me, if you will take this step, I will ensure your eternal salvation and exaltation, and that of your father's household and all of your kindred. You know, if so, I would take that chance too. That's a lot of responsibility put on someone, you know. And it's just so sad. So this promise was so great that I willingly gave myself to purchase so glorious a reward. None but God and angels could see my mother's bleeding heart. When Joseph asked for her if she was willing, she replied, if Helen is willing, I have nothing more to say. She had witnessed the sufferings of others who were older and who better understood the step that they were taking, and to see her child, who had scarcely seen her 15th summer, following the same thorny path, in her mind she saw the misery which was as sure to come as the sun was to rise and set, but it was all hidden from me. And this was written by Helen Mar Kimball in an 1881 autobiography called A Woman's View, and it's available in the BYU Religious Studies Center in 1997. So, why all the agony and anguish if this was innocuous dynastic linking and sealing for the afterlife? Why did it seem so, quote, cruel to Valete, whose heartstrings were already stretched? Among the women and girls was a mother-daughter set and 3 sister sets. Several of these girls included Joseph's own foster daughters, who lived and worked with the Smith home, the Lawrence sisters, the Partridge sisters, and Lucy Walker. If some of these marriages were non-sexual, dynastic, eternal sealings only, as theorized by the church and apologists, why would Joseph need to be sealed to a mother and daughter set? The mother would be sealed to the daughter and would become part of Joseph's afterlife family through the sealing to her mother. So it was just like redundant. So if it wasn't sexual, why are you needing to marry both of them? Marry the mom. Everyone in their family is saved. So Joseph died without being sealed. Hold on, I'm gonna burp. Joseph died without being sealed to his children or to his parents. If a primary motive of these quote sealings was to be connected in the afterlife, as claimed by the church and apologists, what does it say about Joseph's priorities and motives to be sealed to a non-related and already married woman, Patty Sessions, and her 23-year-old already married daughter, Sylvia Sessions, that it was to be sealed to his own parents and his own children? Joseph was married and sealed to at least 22 other women and girls before finally being sealed to his first legal wife, Emma, on May 28, 1843. Emma was not aware of most of these girls and women and their marriages to her husband. Why was, quote, elect lady Emma, the 23rd wife, to be sealed to Joseph? Some of the marriages these women included promises by Joseph to eternal life to the girls and their families, or threats that Joseph, was going to be slain by an angel with a drawn sword if the girls don't marry him. I have a problem with this. This is Warren Jeff's territory. Look him up, bitch. This is Warren Jeff's territory. This is not the Joseph Smith I grew up learning about in the church and having a testimony of. This is not the Joseph Smith to whom I sang praise to the man or taught others about for 2 years in the mission field. Many members do not realize that there is a very specific and bizarre rules outlined in Doctrine and Covenants 132. And then in quotes it says, still in LDS canon, despite President Hinckley publicly stating that polygamy is not doctrinal, end quotes, and how polygamy is to be practiced. It is the kind of revelation you would expect from the likes of Warren Jeffs to his FLDS followers, which is a separate branch of fundamentalists, is what they're called. Fundamental Latter-day Saints. So the only form of polygamy permitted by Doctrine and Covenants 132 is a union with a virgin after first giving the opportunity to be the first wife to consent to the marriage. I don't know. If the first wife doesn't consent, the husband is exempt and may still take an additional wife. But if the first wife must be at least having the opportunity to consent. In case the first wife doesn't consent, she will be, quote, destroyed. Also, the new wife must be a virgin before marriage and be completely monogamous after the marriage, or she will also be destroyed. So it is interesting to see that the only prerequisite that is mentioned for the man is that he must have a desire for another wife. That's it. If another man espouses a virgin and a desire to espouse another, it does not say that a man must get a specific revelation from the living prophet, although many members today assume that that is how polygamy was practiced. Like saying like, oh, your bishop or your priest had a vision and like, God told me that you have to marry this guy who's already married. That's not how it works. So Doctrine and Covenants 132 is unequivocal on the point that polygamy is permitted by only, quote, to multiply and replenish the earth, and, quote, bear the souls of men, end quote. This would be consistent with the Book of Mormon prohibition on polygamy, except in the case where God commands it to, quote, raise up my seed. Again, contrary to Doctrine and Covenants 132, the following summarizes how polygamy was actually practiced by Joseph Smith. So, Joseph married 11 women who were already married, multiple husbands, polyandry, unions without the knowledge or consent of the husband in cases of polyandry. So sometimes the husbands would not know. The married women continued to live as husband and wife with their first husband after marrying Joseph. The union with Apostle Orson Hyde's wife while he was on a mission, Miranda Hyde, a union with the newlywed and pregnant woman Zena Huntington, threats that Joseph would be slain by an angel with a drawn sword if they did not enter into the union, Zena Huntington, Amara Woodward Johnson, and then Mary Lightner. Unions without the knowledge or consent of the first wife, Emma, including to teenagers who worked with Emma in the Smith home, such as the Partridge Sisters and the Lawrence girls. Promises of salvation and exaltation for the girls or for their entire families. Yeah, I'm going to take a break for a second. I have no idea. Part 4? Part 5? We'll get there. Bye.